Greetings, podsters and podlars, and welcome to Cazza and Tracy Talk Gavin and Stacey. I'm Tracy.
And I'm Cazza.
And we are here to talk about what's occurring in Season 3, Episode 4 of Gavin and Stacey. And for a quick reminder of what's happened, let's begin with Tracy's précis. Summing this episode up is pretty straightforward. We open with Gavin and Stacey on the phone talking about their upcoming trip to Essex, where they first have an appointment with the doctor and second will be attending the highlight of this episode, which is Dawn and Pete renewing their wedding vows. And really the whole episode is centred on these two things. The increasingly ridiculous details of Dawn and Pete's vow renewals, including Dawn asking Smithy to walk her down the aisle, counterpointed with the really sad news that Gavin and Stacey received, that Gavin has a low sperm count, so it will be difficult for them to have children. So that's the two plot points, but what's at the core of this episode, do you think, Caroline?
There's three relationships that are really thrown into the spotlight here, and they're three very different. So I think that Dawn and Pete are definitely the slapstick couple. Ness and Smith are kind of the dark comedy couple, and Gavin and Stacey are pure. And so I think there's just a little bit of exploration of those three dynamics. And because they're all just jinged in with each other, it's another magnificent episode, I thought. Just really, really good.
Yeah, I think the contrasts make the episode really strong. I mean, Dawn and Pete even renewing their vows just on its own is a ridiculous idea. And then its manifestation is increasingly outlandish. And then they deal with the fertility news just beautifully, like it's so devastating, but so loving. So we're talking about whether we still love the show. So we're thinking about whether there's anything that makes us cringe or that we don't like anymore. Was there anything like that in this episode for you?
So, I hated all the prostitute stripper stuff, but it was right. It was right to put it in. I don't think there's anything they shouldn't have done. That seems on brand for Pete to say, well, I never had a stripper at my first wedding, so I want one now.
It was.
Yeah, but I didn't like it. I didn't like the fact that when they said, at least she's not a prostitute, and he looked very guilty, and he and Mick were over there. How do you feel about it?
Yeah, I don't like it, but it's not out of place. It's what he would do. I know you've said before in previous episodes that you've liked the Smith family dynamic, but there's something in it in this episode that makes me deeply uncomfortable. And in fact, I fast-forwarded through it and then I thought, I can't do that because I'm supposed to be talking about it. So I went back and watched it. There's something in it that makes me very uncomfortable, particularly the sibling relationship. It's something more than just not liking each other. It's too deep-rooted for me.
That's really interesting. So I think that if you've got a mother who's very much asleep on the job and obviously an absent father, you are going to get these kids who've got no idea and who sort of nest with other families, as Smithy is obviously nested with the Shipmans, and that those kids are going to go on at each other. That moment when they're fighting and they sort of turn around for help from mum and she's just fallen asleep and there's sort of it's not quite despair. It's like, oh, that's right. We ask her for help, but she never does help us. I don't know. For me, that all seemed fine. Not fine, but true.
Maybe it's because it's true. That's what upsets me so much.
Yeah, because of course they're going to be completely wild, those two. They, nobody's been corralling them.
No, nobody.
They just had to go off and make their own fun and their own friends and go for it.
I suppose that's true. I suppose that is why it makes me feel so uncomfortable. I just really didn't enjoy it.
Well, it makes me laugh. Like, I think she plays it so well, Kath Ferris, and Sheridan Smith's brilliant, and her crazy energy. She's coming down she's being dragged by the heels and she's singing Nessun Dorma because she's just told Smithy he looks like Pavarotti in his suit. And he's like, he looks so vulnerable at that. James Corden's blue eyes get really vulnerable as he gets told he looks like, who's the other one she calls him? Placido Domingo. And
well, she says something nice to start. I can't really remember because I can't remember the people. She says something nice and then twists it.
Yeah, he was really vulnerable and she she just plays it for laughs. She doesn't give a shit. But then she's singing Ness and Dormer, and I don't know, it made me laugh.
Yeah, I did laugh sort of at that bit because I could sort of see myself and my brother doing that in a much less bitter and acrimonious way.
So there was an internet thread I read once which had me in stitches, which is about all the terrible things that sisters do to each other, like locking each other in toilets and farting on each other. And it was so cruel. And I just was crying with laughter reading about all the things that you do to your siblings because you know, it comes from this point of love, but you also just your worst around them.
Because you know them and they know you better than anybody else in the world, really.
Anybody else. They know all the buttons to.
So what about the development of the characters? What was there for you?
A couple of things I just loved, which was that when Gav walks in so sad after the car trip, both Pam and Mick know something is up. But they've actually got the sense to just leave it. There's a lot else going on, but you can just see their concern. They love him so much.
They do.
And then also I loved Mick kind of guiding Pete through being a groom again. Like, what a good friend. He didn't want to go over and have the stripper. He's so patient. The moment when Pete is doing his vows, which is to the Coldplay song Fix You, and because he's just repeating song lyrics, he doesn't say lights will guide you home. He says lights will guide you home. It's so funny. And Mick working so hard. No, just say guide. You just say guide, and Pete can't do it. And Nick, no, I like that. And then in the vows, he gets it right. And there's just this lovely moment on Mick's face where he's like, got him through.
Oh, what about anything tugging on your heartstrings?
Oh, sorry. There was a couple more character moments that I was going to talk about, which was that both Bryn and Gav in this episode set some boundaries. Bryn gets really furious with Dave's backseat driving when they're all driving down to Barry.
He does.
and Bryn just puts his foot down. I thought, good on you, Bryn. And then Gav, when he realises that Bryn and Gwen know all about the trying for the baby stuff and they're starting to give him advice on, you know, it's quality, not quantity and all that sort of thing. And he, I think for the first time says, I'm not comfortable talking about this and I'm going to stop this conversation now. I was almost fist pumping. It's like, come on, Gav, good boy.
That was in the background of them changing the sheets on Gavin and Stacey's bed. So it's very intimate.
And he didn't like that either, but he let that one go. And then also there's that little moment when Stacey says, if I can't, she'd said, I think in an earlier episode, if I can't have babies, you won't leave me, will you, Gav? I think that was the episode before. And then it turns out that Gav's the problem. And I wondered, would Stacey leave Gav? Like if she really wants babies? And
I did wonder that too.
Yeah, and he didn't make that demand of her. And she seems like she's in it for the time being and they're going to work through it. But she was really worried that it might go the other way when Gav is so obviously devoted to her. And then also just that whole stuff about Smithy and Dave's and their father roles. That was great. You know, the stepfather, Smithy just trying to say, well, it's my kid. And they did finally, Smithy stood up for himself. Like he knows that he's in a lot of ways just the sperm donor in this relationship, but he wants to be more and he tries to be more. And Dave keeps setting him up as just the sperm donor and that he's the actual father. I shouldn't say sperm donor, but anyway. all of that is really good.
They are playing that nicely, I think.
They're getting a couple of laughs out of it, but also some real truth. So those step-parent dynamics are so difficult.
Especially across distance. So did you have anything tugging on your heartstrings?
That quiet, sad car ride with Stacey and Gavin after they've heard the news and it's a minute of footage of them just in the car looking at each other. They don't say a word. It's lovely. And I did really like Smithy squaring up to Dave and just that moment when Pam and Mick were so worried about Gavin, knew something was wrong but didn't press and just let him go up to the room, but the little worried glances as he went away, just all those,
yeah,
so good.
I really liked Pam and Mick's clear care. So you know that they're going to be in safe hands. It was really interesting watching this for me, actually, because I know I've said before how I first watched this show at a time when I had a lot going on in my life and how this show was like a precious piece of escapism and it was a real comfort watch. But one of the things that was going on, which was constantly in the background, was fertility issues that my partner and I were having. And it's weird because I actually cried like buckets when I was watching it a couple nights ago this time. But back when I was in the midst of it all, I found this really comforting. I was so surprised to realise that the other night when I was kind of watching it, that I had found it comforting at the time, and then retrospectively, 20 years later, I'm in buckets on the lounge. Obviously, I was feeling more for them than I am for me at this distance, but it was just a really interesting thing to realise that at the time when it was so pertinent, it was a comfort, and now I can sort of cry about it.
Yeah, it released the trauma. Because you were living the trauma when you watched it, and so I guess that's the problem.
Yeah,
halved is whatever, shared is halved.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah. Although
but now with distance, it's like, oh no, that was a really sad time in my life, and I was really sad, and maybe I didn't let it all out.
Yeah. Although it's kind of interesting because heaps of stuff when you're going through it, you just can't watch. You turn it off. Yeah. Anyway, so I did find that definitely tugged on my heartstrings. As a counterpoint to that, what was your favourite joke?
You didn't like it, but I really liked the fight with the suit and the Pavarotti and all that sort of thing. There's a very cute little baby moment where they hold up Neil the baby's arm in a little muscle pose. You know, I just love babies being cute. They, you know, every time you hold them up and go, Superman, like that's just me being a clucky person. The whole mystery to everyone about why Dave had to be invited to Pete and Dawn's renewal vows, when Pete had hit Dave and called him I
can't remember what he was.
Something like a scaramouche, it wasn't that. But also just the wedding vows were very funny, and the funniest bit was the ring, the Puff Daddy ring. All the stuff about the ring was funny. Pam going, oh my Christ, when she first saw it, and Pete revealing that it was a P, and he's saying, well, you know, you can't just have your own name, surely it should be D, and he turns his finger upside down and says, no, but it's a D as well when you do your hand that way. It just wrecking the vows for poor Dawn afterwards. I mean, the ring was just so funny.
Anything to do with the vow renewals cracked me up. The ring especially. Yeah. Well, I watch a lot of soaps and they always have vow renewals and they're always ridiculous in a soapy way. But it was ridiculous in its own Gavin and Stacey way. Pete making Mick go back for the night, the ring, everyone's priceless reactions to the ring. That whole storyline was outstanding. It was 10 out of 10. I will never grow tired of watching that.
Yeah, and they did have a nice moment when, you know, there were moments where Pete and Dawn were genuinely sweet together, and then back to toxic Pete and Dawn, and it turns on a dime. You're like, you got it, it goes away, it comes back. Yeah, I love it. It was so good.
It was nice to see that moment where it could have all worked out. It was brief. And so we bring along a question each episode to see how well the other person has been watching, or in my case, not really remembering. Do you have a question for me?
I think this is just going to show one of the gaps in my growing up popular culture. But I had to Google both Dawn and Pete used songs as their vows, and just really inappropriate ones. That whole Coldplay song "Fix You" was just I will fix you. So I thought, why would you say that at a wedding vow? It is a nice song, but I had to Google what Dawn did. Do you know what song that Dawn had?
I do.
Yeah.
It's so inappropriate. It was the Michael Jackson Ben song, which is about his pet rat.
Yes. So all of that was missed because I didn't listen to much Michael Jackson. So I couldn't sing you that song. I don't know it.
I didn't really listen to Michael Jackson either, but I did know the songs. I was blown away once I realised that's what he was saying. I laughed a lot at that. Well, I do have a question. My question is, what are the names of Pete and Dawn's children?
I think there's Adrian, was it? Oh, that just reminds me of another joke too when they're talking about that. There's that movie Doubt, which is kind of a little backstory with the Hens Night, as they watch the movie Doubt with Philip Seymour Hoffman and Meryl Streep. And Pam refers to him as Philip Dustin Hoffman. Oh, that made me laugh and laugh. Fiona and Alex.
That is correct. Did you write that down? Oh, you're very smart. I should start.
I was gonna make that a question for you, obviously, and then forgot.
Oh, yeah, because that was really nice when they came forward. I hadn't really clicked to me that Dawn and Pete would have children, and then they come forward as part of the wedding ceremony.
Yeah, that was a good end game joke too, because they have never been mentioned the whole series, and then suddenly there they are. Of course, they've got kids.
I thought it was genius. Yeah.
You didn't see Gav interact with them either, did you?
No.
which is interesting. So they're not really part of the kids don't get
The
invited
milieu,
over much.
no. So at the end of this episode, Dawn and Pete are pretty much back where they started in a fairly dysfunctional relationship. Nessa and Smithy are still negotiating their way through.
Oh, no.
things.
It's a cliffhanger because Smithy tells Dave they woke up together and Dave didn't know that. So,
Oh, yes, he does in the wedding. Yes.
Yeah, when he squares up to Dave, he brings that up and then that's, dun, 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 that's how it ends. It's really a thing. I do also really like how in that they still don't know if they did the deed.
I can't be
he was
sure.
naked, but she had her Aston Villa shirt on and Gav's little aside at that was
Aston Villa.
Can't let go of that. Aston Villa.
Well, Gavin and Stacey are going to have to face their biggest challenge yet. So there's a lot about to happen, and we're halfway through this series. There's a lot has to happen between now and the end of this series. All right. Well, I'm off to watch the next one. So I will talk to you next time, Cazla.
Thanks, Tracela. Have a great day.
Bye.